Well, high school and middle school math they lay your foundations, right? Like that's what's going to give you the building blocks, you know, fractions, basic algebra, basic geometry, basic trigonometry. For some of the more advanced students, calculus.
I don't know. Do you feel like that? Because I don't feel like I do not feel like I learned the foundations of mathematics in high school.
No, I don't either. I mean, it's supposed to do those things, and I'd agree. Like my foundations would be like sand. Like they were just washed away as soon as I got to college.
Was you know, in Schifrin's class and in a lot of other math classes, they're like, oh well, you should have learned this in high school, and I'm just like, yeah, what? Again, that was my favorite line. Was Schifrin was like, oh well, then you should have learned that, you know, if you have a polynomial over the reals, that the complex roots will appear in conjugate pairs, and I'm like, no.
Yeah.
When I first learned about polynomials, my algebra teacher denied the existence of imaginary numbers.
Yeah, we just didn't deal with them. Yeah, I never really worked with like imaginary numbers. I didn't know that imaginary numbers came in conjugate pairs until I got to college, until I was actually started to use complex numbers.
Can I tell you my story about what happened when?
Yeah, definitely.
So, have you heard
Yes,
this?
I heard it like 3 times already.
Yeah. Well, I'm still mad about it.
Yes,
I haven't gotten over it. So, right. So my best friend, he had an older brother, and still has an older brother. And he was into math and engineering and physics, and so my friend and I, Ari and I, were really good at math, and so you know, some older brothers will hook little brother up with, you know, porn and cigarettes, but Zohar hooked us up with math that was, you know, beyond what we were learning at the time, because we were just really hungry for it and we're totally eating it up. And so I learned about polynomials long before we hit it in algebra, and the quadratics and the quadratic formula was just all stuff that I thought was really, really, really interesting. I thought it was really cool that we had this one formula, every single quadratic solved.
Just wrote it.
And then I was like, well, what happens if you get a negative number under the square root? And he was like, oh, you can imagine. And I was like, holy smokes, you can do that? And like,
what? Imaginary?
I know, and it was totally awesome. Cut to like 3 years later when we're actually like learning about that in school, and this is 8th grade, we're talking about square roots and cube roots and just roots of numbers, and you know, Miss Spizak was her name. She was talking about stuff, and she was like, if you take the square root of a positive number, you get a positive number, and if you take a cube root of a negative number, you get a negative number. And then someone just asked, like, well, what happens if you take a square root of a negative number? Like, there was this long pause, and I got real excited. I was like, holy smokes, I know the answer. And then I was like, you know, I raised my hand, and she was like, yeah, Eddie, what? And I was like, you get an imaginary number. And, you know, there's like this pause, this quiet in the room, and then everyone busted out laughing. I was like, well, there's Eddie. Eddie was his imaginary friends and his imaginary numbers.
That's awesome.
And no, I was pissed. I'm still pissed.
No. So everyone bursts out laughing though, but like, because they think an imaginary number is ridiculous. But did you get to explain like, no, like you get this number and it's not a real number. It's not in that set, but it's the square root.
I didn't have the fight that I have today, where I'll be like, no, I'm right.
Yeah.
March up to the board and explain to everyone how.
And your teacher didn't elaborate more on
that?
No,
she totally did not back me up. Miss Spizak, I'm still holding this grudge. I want you to know that.
Dude, I can't believe your teacher didn't look at that as like a cool opportunity to just like expand a little, like, you know, take a nice aside and be like, yeah, actually, you'll learn about these numbers later. Like,
but you see, but I think that's part of one of my big problems with high school math is that there are no asides. There's no like we're actually having a discussion about math. It's, you know, we have a curriculum and we're sort of like plowing through it. Yeah. And I mean, I don't have a problem with it. That's boring. And I have a problem with that on that level, but the deeper problem that I have with it is that, like, when it comes to math, and with other stuff as well, that everyone's sort of like on a different level.
For sure.
You know, extremely rare sort of moments in, like, say, in the education of English, where everyone sort of has to be on the same point, same page at the same time, like on a vocab quiz or something. But, you know what I mean, like when it comes to sort of composition and stuff like that, people are supposed to write to their level, not to the level that we're at the class, you know.
Yeah.
You have 3, 5 pages, umpteen pages, you know, do whatever. And I would really like it if, you know, there was some way where we could, like, redo math where it was more like that, where...
Yeah, where you can really, like, as the more advanced students can work to their ability, like, can show that they have a deeper knowledge, they can explore those areas. And the students that are not so far along in their math abilities can kind of get brought up to speed and work at their own pace and explore it at their own level.
Right, and I think that, like, you know, people working at, you know, sort of being at different mathematical levels, you know, sort of all communicating with each other is good for a lot of reasons. Not on one side, we, you know, the people, you know, the more experienced cats who are sort of explaining things to less experienced students, that's actually very beneficial for both of them, you know, and they're hearing it from their peers as opposed to from their teacher. And I don't know, that can, I mean, but one of the other things that I think that's really, really good about that, I think that's very valuable, that we, like, in the discipline, like, get as much experience as possible sort of explaining math to people who are, like, outside our field.
I agree, especially as you get into, like, the higher levels of mathematics and you're working with proofs and you have to explain your answer to someone else. Like, that's one of the hardest things I've had to do in math, is explain my proof. Because, like, it makes sense to me because it's just my thought process.
Right.
And you can kind of tie it into CS, like, that's why you comment your code. Right. Because your code is just your thought process. So, like, you can look at it and it makes total sense. You hand it to someone else and 30 lines of code can just be...
completely meaningless.
Exactly. Yeah. Like, they can find nothing in it. And so with math, the ability to communicate your math and the results and your understanding is really, it's vital, and that was never something I was taught.